So there's nothing quite like a piece of music that hits you right here. Something so emotive that you can't quite help but react to it. So today we're going to look at 10 of my favorite super sad or super melancholy chords. Should be a lot of fun. So as I go along, I'll put the chord shapes on the screen so that you guys can play along with me. Now, some of the voicings are pretty complex, so I'll give a simplified version for some of them so that it's easier to play. If you want a paper copy, that'll be available over on my Patreon page. Let's jump in and check out chord number 1. Now, chord number 1 is an absolute classic. This is the A minor 9, and it's so evocative and so emotional. This is definitely one of my top 10 saddest guitar chords. Now, to get the high G makes it a little bit trickier. You could definitely play it without. And that high E still sounds great with the chord. But if you hit the high G, it really takes it to the next level. Now, you could just simplify that to a straight A minor. So if you're just learning guitar, you could start there, and then if you're an intermediate, try this voicing, and if you've been playing for a while, add that high G. This one, great chord to know. So chord number 2 was the C sharp minor 9, and what an incredible evocative sound. Just a wonderful, wonderful sounding chord. Now, if this stretch of a root to a fifth to a ninth is a little bit too tricky for your hand right now, you could simplify it to just like a power chord built off C sharp, so a root, fifth, and another root, and it sounds like this. It's not quite as powerful, but it still sounds good. Now, I think that ninth, I think it does add quite a bit to the chord. But if you can't quite get it yet, then just try this way. Alright, so let's break down chord number 3. This one's based around our B minor chord. What we're going to do is just remove the bar by arching your finger and maybe pushing your wrist forward and taking off our octave B, because we already have a B here, we don't need one here, and we're going to play the open G. And that's the flat 6 or flat 13, and it sounds like this. Just a wonderful emotive chord, and if you're more of an advanced player and you can reach the high A, then that also adds a bunch of color as well. Now, chord number 4 is an absolute classic. This is E minor 9, and it's very simple to play. So this is the simplistic version. It's literally a power chord. So you have your B and your F sharp, and of course the F sharp is the 9th in the key of E. So this is E minor 9, and it sounds like this. Just wonderfully evocative and so melancholy, and it's so easy to play. Now, if you want to use the voicing that I have on the screen where we have the 9 up high on the first string, you just kind of juggle your fingers around. So you would play it like this, which is a little bit trickier, but you do get the high 9. And I think that sounds slightly better or slightly more emotional than just the open E. And that sounds like this. So even though this video is my top 10 ultra sad guitar chords, I didn't want to just, jam them full of minor chords. So this is an example of a major 9 without a third. And of course, as you heard, it sounds like this. So even though it doesn't have a strong, minor feel like the straight D minor, it still has a very interesting sound. And I think it has a little bit more of an unresolved kind of feeling because it doesn't have a major third or a minor third. It kind of is left unopened or unending. And so I think it kind of has an interesting kind of longing quality where you don't know how to resolve it, but it just kind of leaves you hanging. And that's why I love that chord. Now chord number 6 is a major 9. So this is actually a major chord, but I really like the feeling, just like the previous chord, it's sort of a little bit more, I don't know if it's unresolved, but it really has that longing quality. So I really like how that sounds, especially with the open string. So 6th string and 1st string can ring open with this chord. Now this is typically a jazz chord, but when you use it sort of with arpeggios and with the tone that I'm using and in the style that I'm using, I think it gives a really nice emotional tone. Now chord number 7 is definitely a bit of a stretch, and I'm not sure there's a super easy way to play this. Maybe if you just removed your ring finger and just played, a smaller voicing with the G sharp and the D sharp here. Maybe something like that, but I think having the lower F sharp here does help quite a bit. Again, a very complex and emotional sounding chord. This is one of my favorite as well. I mean, when I do these videos, I always say every single chord is my favorite, but I guess that's why they're in my top 10. But this one definitely is very special, and I think it sounds wonderful. Now for chord number 8, it's all about the semitone. So that F and the E. That's absolutely key to these kind of chords. Finding open strings wherever they are that are a semitone above or below the root, and you're going to get that kind of tone. Now, if you kind of spread them by an octave, so if you played like an F here and the E, sounds good, but it's not quite the same as. So if you separate them, they have that same kind of tonality, but not quite as intense. And so that's what this chord is all about, getting that F to the E. So I would suggest, messing around with some of the chord shapes that you know and start adding some open strings. It can lead to some really creative ideas. Now we certainly couldn't do a top 10 saddest guitar chords video without adding a diminished. Here we go, let's check it out. So for chord number 9, we're going to use a C diminished. Now this is a full diminished shape, so we have the double flat 7, which actually is a 6 chord, which is why Guitar Pro spit this out as a 6 chord, but it is a diminished shape. Now diminished chords definitely have their own kind of flavor, so full of color and dissonance. But we're going to use the technique I talked about in our previous chord. We're going to use a semitone. So what we're going to do is take this D sharp and add an open E. And again, it's going to give that kind of really interesting quality. It just adds that, really intense kind of melancholy feel. So we're going to do a traditional diminished chord, but use that D sharp to an E, and that sounds like this. Now, as you guys could see, the 10th and final shape was movable, and I started on a C sharp and worked my way down, and a B, A, and then finally. Now, I really love this shape up on a D on 10th fret as well. I didn't play it, but it sounds absolutely haunting and wonderful up here as well. Amazing that that same shape can sound so different, like here, and so different up here. So anyway, I would recommend, learning this shape. I think it's absolutely wonderful, and you can move it around and experiment. And again, it has that open E string, which gives some, added color and interest. So there you go. Those are my top 10. So now let's talk a little bit about the tone, because there's a certain set of effects that really help you achieve this atmospheric kind of haunting, melancholy kind of sound, and that is a lot of stereo reverb. A super long and kind of sumptuous reverb sound along with a little bit of delay. So I probably have like 3 delays, and that just causes the reverb to kind of like cascade upon itself. So when you do play, a chord that you like, as it kind of like bleeds out and sustains, you get an absolutely wonderful sound. So that's really key, to achieve this kind of style. So I really hope this video inspires you guys to try out some new voicings or try out a new style of playing. Hopefully you guys found them helpful. Let me know in the comments below which chord you guys thought sounded the nicest, or which chord you might use in, some of your regular music. Or if you have a favorite voicing, drop it in the videos below. Share it with the rest of the commenters. That would be awesome. Now the rest of my links, including t-shirt store, tab store, link to my Patreon if you want a paper copy, all that stuff will be down in the video description below. Have yourself a great week.